Alright. Hello everybody. My name is Large Boy Nuggets, and I'm going to read you my favorite government document. So this is Operation Majestic 12, and it's pretty crazy. So it affects the documents, or it affects the national defense and security of the United States of America. This is how. Hold on, I'm skipping ahead just a little bit to this part where the organization, so the directorate, task units, and enforcement are all here. Directorate up here. I guess also these ones, yeah, these ones are also I just read it, sorry. Task units. So they get everything ready, and then they give it all to the enforcement to go actually do the dirty work. So, this is my favorite little part here. Operation Majestic. Codename Project Aquarius. 1 of 1. Warning, this is an ultra top secret, your eyes only document containing essential this is the hardest word to say for me. Compartmentalized information for the national security of these United States of America. Access to the enclosed material is strictly and only limited to persons possessing Magic 12 clearance. Approval is issued by presidential authority only. Reproduction in any form or the taking of any sorts of notations is strictly prohibited. So we doing it anyway. Let's see here. So this is all like, oh, this is really top secret. Don't read me. Don't. Oh, this is some boring shit. Don't read me. Oh, this is the history of Magic 12 and Vannevar Bush is a part of it. Yeah, we don't really need to. This is one of the parts that we need to understand. Roswell, New Mexico. On the 7th of July, 1947, a secret operation was begun to assure recovery of the wreckage of an unidentified flying object which had crashed at a remote site in New Mexico. The object was downed approximately 75 miles northwest of Roswell Army Air Station, later Walker Field. So I think they tore it down. The rancher and was escorted to authorities there by a local rancher during. Sorry, this is kind of faded. The source of the ships. During the search of the ships. Oh my god, man. edit out, okay. During the ships. The search of the ships. Search of the ships. The search during the search of the ship, aerial reconnaissance discovered that 4 small human-like beings had apparently ejected from the craft at some point before it had exploded. These had fallen to Earth about 2 miles east of the crash site where the wreckage was located. All of the 4 crew All of the 4 crew members were dead and badly decomposed due to actions of predators and exposure to the elements during approximately 1 week watch prior to their recovery. A special scientific team then took charge of the removal of the bodies and recovery of the wreckage of the craft. Civilian and military witnesses in the area were debriefed and something there. Reporters were given the effective cover story that a misguided weather balloon was responsible for the sighting. A covert something organized by General Nathan F. Twining and Dr. Vannevar Bush, acting on the direct orders of President Harry S. Truman, resulted in a preliminary consensus. 19 September 1947, that a disc-shaped craft was most likely a short-range reconnaissance ship. This wreckage was it ends in ION. This was based for the most part of the craft's size and appearance of provisioning. Lack of provisioning and the appearance appearing lack of provisioning. Sorry, this is the harder part to read. A similar analysis of the 4 decomposed pilots was arranged by Dr. Detlov Bronk. This guy, keep his name in mind. It was the tentative something group, 10 November 1947. Ship group. I can't really tell what it says there, sorry. That although these aliens are generally human-like in appearance, the biological and evolutionary something for their development has apparently been quite different than those observed or postulated in Homo sapiens, Earth humans. Dr. Bronk's used the term since then widely applied of this is where they use EBE, extraterrestrial biological entities, or EBEs, for these creatures. Until such a better definitive designation can be agreed upon, it was the something decision of the scientists involved in this investigation. So you kind of understand where we're going, right? Roswell, the weather balloon was a cover-up. Let me scroll over to this side. The crash near Roswell occurred sometime in the evening of the 2nd or 3rd of July 1947, about 20:47 hours. At least 24 persons in the area observed a bright yellow or sun-colored disc-shaped object over the area. On July 3rd, 1947, in the early afternoon, the widely scattered wreckage was discovered by a local ranch manager, William Brazel, and his son and daughter. The authorities at the Roswell Field Army Air Force Base was alerted by Mr. Brazel at 9:18 of the 7th of July, 1947. And the two officers of the base were guided to the crash site by the ranch manager. Why don't they just call him a rancher? These were the Major Jesse Marcel and Staff Intelligence Officer of the 505th Bomb Group Intelligence Office, and Captain Leo Stearns of the Counterintelligence Corps. When the two officers returned to Roswell Field with the samples of the crash site material, they immediately reported to Colonel William Blanchard of Air Tactical Command. It was at this point that the first of many decisions were made that have gone into historical posture of the government's position on the public's need to know about the situation. Colonel Blanchard released the official press statement confirming that the wreckage of a flying disc had been recovered. This was phoned in to an Albuquerque, New Mexico radio station without approval from higher level command in the Army Air Corps. Indeed, no one in the Pentagon or anywhere else was notified until consulted prior to the release of this information. In defense of Colonel Blanchard's actions, it should be noted that no established procedure on the issue existed at the time. There was no Office of Special Investigations, CIA, NSA, or the Defense Intelligence Agency, or any other similar such organizations at the time. It should be noted that within less than 2 years following this incident, it has, and as its direct result, all of the above agencies were established, with the exception of the DIA, which was chartered until in 1961. At nearly the same time, on the evening of the 7th of July, two events were tabling the incident in a widely different direction at widely separated locations. In Roswell, Major Marcel, ordered by Colonel Blanchard to load the debris on board a B-25 aircraft and fly it to Wright Field, now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, at Dayton, Ohio for examination. As this was being done, a reporter from the Albuquerque radio station called to the Wright field to confirm the crash with the commanding general there. This was Nathan Twining. Where any such reported incident should have been filed, or filed, is what it says. In fact, the wreckage and all the persons involved were already on their way to Wright Field, but this was the first that General Twining had heard of the matter. Twining was forced to state that he knew nothing of a crashed disc craft. These lying bastards. Alright, let me zoom out here a bit. So we're gonna read this left side, but kind of skip over these people because we don't really give a shit, I guess. But we're just gonna read Bronk. All right. Upon finally receiving verbal confirmation by open telephone line, Colonel Blanchard at the Roswell field, General Twining did three things in rapid order, and in an effort to contain the situation. First, he sent, I think that's supposed to say, official orders by secured teletype to Blanchard at Roswell, instructing to do nothing and talk to no one until further orders from him. Twining used the same system to contact General Roger, who, in command at Carswell Army Air Force Base, I think it's Fort Worth, Texas, ordering him to direct Major Marcel to vector something for an intermediate stop at Carswell, which was on his flight. General Raymonds was instructed to remove the recovered debris of the aircraft and place it on board another in sealed crates to forward it to Wright Field. Order Marcel and his crew not to talk to reporters. Notify the press of a photo conference to be held where an explanation would be given. State a conference that the wreckage was only remains of a weather balloon and it's attached something foil radar target at permanently display created evidence of same. Some of this is cut off, so return Major Marcel at once to Roswell Field, then General Twining, an open teletype. Yeah, this is kind of cut off, so it's kind of hard to read. The wreckage recovered at Roswell consisted of 327 fragmented pieces of various structural debris. Most dominant amongst these structures seems of many links. I think it's supposed to say prominent. And ranging in diameter and thickness from just over half an inch to under 2 inches. Were found to be comprised, I think that's what it's supposed to say, of a very light and porous, ooh, metal alloy. Oh my god, that makes so much sense. Uh, pure of naturally pure aluminum and silicon mixed with I think it's supposed to be like a zinc ingot, zinc zirconium, zirconium with a crystalline structure. The beams were flexible and were solely unaffected by both so they're unaffected by blow torches. Several of these contained hieroglyphic and alphabetic writings of unknown type imprinted on their surfaces. Also found were many something, because it's cut off, of this metallic foil. The material presumed to have been the outer casing of the craft's hull, or the case, basically. Following these discoveries near Roswell, New Mexico, it became obvious to the intelligence officers working under the newly appointed Secretary of Defense, James V. Forrestal, that a special operations group was going to be needed to coordinate the acclamation of a dissemination of data on the subject. This became known as the Majestic 12 Group when the President Harry Truman chartered them in September of 1947. The original directorate of the group were as follows: Dr. Lloyd Berkner, scientist and executive secretary God dang, of the Joint Research and Development Board in 1946 under Dr. Vannevar Bush. Also headed the Special Committee to establish the Weapon Systems Evaluation Group. Was scientific consultant to the CIA on UFOs during his years with the MJ-12. Dr. Detlev Bronk, internationally known physiologist and biophysicist who was chairman of the National Research Council and the Medical Advisory Board of the Atomic Energy Commission, later Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Also chairman of the Scientific Advisory Committee of the Brookhaven National Laboratory. I'm gonna look that up real quick. New York. Anyway, just had to do that. Dr. Vannevar Bush. This guy made the atom bomb. It says it right here. Served as James Forrestal. He's the Secretary of the Navy before Secretary of Defense under President Truman. So he's a pretty well-known guy. Menzel, director of the Harvard College Observatory, and a consultant to the National Security Agency on Astronomy, held a top-secret ultra clearance. So this is who we should really understand. Who the Harvard was in this. Everyone was a part of this, but enough about these Nazis, to be honest. Let's get on to the fun part, shall we? It is possible to disclose the identities of the original MJ-12 Directorate because they are all deceased. It is necessary in order to understand the climate of confusion and anxiety resulting from the second recovery incident at Aztec, New Mexico in 1948. So this is what we're getting to. And I love how it's on the right side and it's readable, most of it. On the 25th of March 1948 at approximately 16:19 hours Mountain Standard Time, a disc-shaped flying machine came down about 12 miles northeast of the small community of Aztec, New Mexico. The controlled landing occurred in a small desert canyon on the private grazing land of a local farmer and rancher. Excuse me. The approach of the disc was tracked with the aid of 3 high-powered missile tracking radar stations belonging to the recovery network of the White Sands Test Range and located in classified areas of southwest New Mexico. The disc craft was first observed in violation of the restricted airspace of this facility. The disc was flying on a level glide path and was heading from the southwest to northeast about 3,200 feet altitude when first detected. This track detection resulted in an Air Force Defense Command alert that included the scrambling of squadrons of jet interceptors from the nearby Sandy and White Sands bases. Also spot a recent memorandum issued through Operation Majestic, the Commander-in-Chief of Air Defense Command, CICADC, immediately notified Secretary of State General George C. Marshall. At 17:53 hours, 5:53 p.m., the disc-shaped craft appeared to lose both speed and altitude at nearly the exact moment that it was triangulated by returns from all 3 radar dish antennae in an effort to vector the interceptor squadrons toward their target. At the time, it seemed to be an evasive tactic on the part of the disc craft. The current assessment is that the microwaves from these long-range radar mostly certainly evidenced a damage to the power or flight control systems of the disc craft. At 18:02 hours LT, the craft dropped below radar some 4 minutes before White Sands Jet Squadron would have reached intercept point and engaged to disc craft. Excuse me. Estimates later indicated the disc craft impacted or landed approximately at 18:19 hours. The exact position of the landing zone was determined within minutes by calculation of the last radar triangulation. Uh, tri- by calculation of the last radar triangulated tracks and confirmed by a visual flyover of interceptors from the White Sands base. The LZ-IP intercept point, the landing zone intercept point, was at the bottom of Nort Canyon, a dry wash area about 12.2 miles northeast of Aztec, New Mexico, and 2.3 miles northwest of the Cave Creek Bend at the Animos River. This was on private land about 1.7 miles north of the state highway and nearly 1/3 miles west of unpaved county road South 141. At 18:26 hours on March 25th, 1948, the crash site was visually confirmed by the commander of the 152 Tactical Fighter Wing and relayed to the Air Defense Command officer at Sandy's Base, Albuquerque, New Mexico. This information was conveyed at once to the CICADC, who contacted the Secretary of State. By 1835, General Marshall had made contact with the Army Air Force Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit, a section of the Army Counterintelligence Directorate. The IPU was maintained and supported out of a nearby Camp Male, I think Male, Colorado, and was the closest group able to secure, recover, and transport and store a disabled disc craft. This action was entirely correct in the interval before a majestic operation could be activated, and the preparations of the IPU group while awaiting a Magicops crew saved valuable time. We're getting to the bottom of this. So this is whenever it becomes unreadable and even has a whole redacted part. The IPU was formed after the Roswell, New Mexico crash recovery and was later absorbed into the Enforcement Division of Operation Majestic. At the time that the Department of the Air Force was established as an entity separate from the U.S. Army. The disc craft was recovered and the landing zone declared secured by 2245 through the actions of the IPU scout team sent to, I think it's the Hart Canyon area. Meanwhile, General Marshall had contacted Vannevar Bush, the scientific head of Magicops, and a joint IPU Magicops team was assembled under MJ-12 command for the purpose of investigating and clearing the landing zone or the crash site. The local rancher who owned the land and blacked out were held in communication while the field analysis and subsequent cleanup was conducted at Hart Canyon. Visiting with the rancher at the time and planned to hunt for game animals on his land were the owner of a local radio repair shop, plus an unemployed oil hunter and inventor. These last two parties were later to get together and tell their story to a columnist from Variety magazine named Frank Scully. This author later published a book in 1950 detailing parts of the Aztec recovery story. This breach of security was askewed I think that's what it said, askewed by the use of a cover story for the IPU Magic Hops workers that proved to be ineffective. It was decided to disguise the Aztec efforts as an exploration for oil by a fictional drilling company, a fact that was not in agreement with the knowledge of the unemployed oil hunter who knew that there was no oil in the area. Later, both this independent oil hunter and the columnist Scully were discredited by facts leaked to a writer at True magazine by covert operatives of the Majestic 12 Enforcement Division. Sorry. This action was unfortunate, but very vital in light of the sensitivities. Oh, the sensational nature of the Aztec discovery. Fortunately, Scully labeled this fortune-hunting oil man as a scientist in his book, and during the period of the book's sales, this adventurer was convicted of fraud for trying to peddle a device that would find oil, mostly by luck. The security breach healed itself, and the book was quickly forgotten with only minor help from MJ12. That's how they do it. Right there. That evening of the 25th of March, General Marshall ordered ADC off of alert status and requested that they send teletypes to the radar station advising them that there had been a false alarm. Time was an important factor here since the disk craft had landed intact and had the appearance of having been landed under the control of its operators. No means of entry was immediately available of the IP use this is what I'm saying, available of the IPU scout team considered it possible that the scan of the crew of the disk craft might still be alive. It's really hard to read, I'm sorry, I might get some of the words wrong. They're basically thinking that because it landed a certain way, it like did an emergency landing, that they think that the pilots are still alive. At 1:28 hours of 26th of March, sorry, I'm just reading it how it is on the thing. The team of MJ12 scientists assembled by Dr. Bush arrived at Derange It's kind of hard to read that one word there. Airfield, Colorado, about 35 miles northwest. I think that says east actually, northeast of Aztec. All members of the IPU and Magic Ops investigations were then sworn to the ultra top secret security oath. All the personal property and identification was left in lockers at Durango, is what it is. And the trucks headed for Hart Canyon site. It must be remembered that the helicopter was still in experimental development at this stage, and trucks were the best means of entering the rugged terrain, as well as the fact that they would cause far less attention than the noisy and unfamiliar helicopter, which was, however, used to bring in the Intel IPU scout team. Interesting facts. One name was withheld to protect a living individual's privacy. Some bullshit. So, they're just detailing some names. But we don't really care about them right now. Although not present during the recovery phase of the Aztec operation at Hart Canyon, it is important we acknowledge the contributions made later by Lambroy Calamos and William Friedman, who are experts in language and cryptology and whose analysis of the writings and symbols found aboard the discraft led to a degree of understanding in the cryogenic suspension system used to freeze the ship's occupants. Also, Dr. Paul A. Scherer, whose supply of refrigeration and nitrogen cooling and pumping equipment aided greatly in the revival of the suspended occupants aboard the discraft and field laboratory set up at Los Alamos. Roth, Calamos, and Friedman went on to work for Operation Majestic for many years in our covert operations section of the Enforcement Division as deep planted agents within the NSA, or Scherer led an illustrious career as a research and development director for the Air Research Corps. The IPU Magic Ops convoy took routes to the Hart Canyon site that avoided main roads, and on arrival they set up roadblocks and secured a 2 mile perimeter around the canyon rim and landing site. In exchange for his silence, private land was leased from the farmer who owned the field at Hart Canyon, or in Hart Canyon, for the construction of the controlled access road, and from the gas drilling site and personnel involved wore coveralls with the name of the fake oil exploration firm created by the Magic Ops team for this purpose. Later, a fence was constructed around the perimeter of the canyon and bore the name of the oil convoy, and warning of blasting on signs were attached to the fences. When time came for the removal of restoration of the site, the trucks were used that wore labels of high explosives and were escorted by blue berets disguised as National Guardsmen. The cover story, which was very effective in keeping the news away, was spread that these trucks were removing large amounts of nitroglycerin used in blasting during oil explorations. So, they lie, yeah. Shortly after sunrise, on the 26th of March, 1948, the Magic Ops team began operations at the Heart Canyon location. Measurements of the radiation levels around the craft and landing site were taken and proved negative, nothing out of the ordinary. Some high concentrations of potassium chlorate powder were detected in soil samples surrounding the disc craft. A fine yellowish dust composed of particles less than 5 microns in diameter was detected coating the nearby underbrush. Chemical analysis showed that this coating this was composed of sulfurous substances in an unfamiliar combination having a blatant rhombic crystalline structure and was mixed with and something, I can't really see what that says, and an extremely high electropositive element in the iodide group. It is now known that this is a form of disinfectant automatically discharged by the craft upon touching the planet's bioactive soil. Linear calibration surveys were taken by the Surveyor's Transit, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. And photographs were taken of every possible angle with a Graflex 4x5 plate camera equipped with special calibration overlay masks to register dimensions on the film. The ship was determined to be 99.983 feet in diameter and 42.638 feet in height or thickness, including the 9.451 foot extension of the landing height or pods supporting it off the ground. These 3 round hemispheric pods beneath the craft had obviously been extended from within the hull during a controlled landing effort. These were measured to form the points of an equilateral triangle 22.3 feet on a side, center to center, and were 16.45 feet in each IROM. The epicenter of the craft's bottom hull. So, it's basically describing it. Both upper and lower hull surfaces were smooth, with no means of entry or even propulsion immediately in evidence. The hull was the color of a dull, unpolished aluminum and was apparently metallic in nature, with a normal surface temperature. No seams, hatchets, rivets, or portholes were obvious. Photographs taken at closer than 15 feet were found to be blurred. Later, both infrared and magnetic radiation fluids were found to surround the craft and no doubt responsible for fogging the films in close photographs. Watches and other ferric iron-based tools and instruments left within this zone around the craft were found to be magnetized. Eventually, the team crawled across the upper hull surface with access by a scaffold erected around one side of the craft. Upon conducting a close examination, they discovered a small hairline crack at the base site bulge in the domed top of the upper hull. Careful study determined this crack to be irregular enough as to it to be a result of an accidental impact with a solid object. Much later, a civilian witness was debriefed in Albuquerque who testified that he had observed the craft strike the side of a cliff along the south bank of the Animas River at about the same time the saucer ship dropped below radar. After banging on the hull and yelling through a loudspeaker, failed to receive any response from the presumed occupants of the disk craft, it was decided to attempt to widen this crack in an attempt to gain entry. At first, the discussion was held as to the possibilities of the craft's internal atmosphere being explosive or that our air could be poisoned to the occupants to breathe. Finally, Dr. Bush waived all such debate on the grounds that if such action was to be taken immediately, or the chance of the survival of the members of the ship's crew would run out with time. They used blowtorches. First, heat, that's what it is. First, heat from blow torches was applied in excess of 10,000 degrees, and finally diamond tipped drill bits were used to crack what was at last extended longitudinally and finally widened into a gap great enough to shine a small electric light inside and look around. Another plate of material of similar construction seemed to be solidly blocking the view. However, at the seam along the bottom edge of the panel, another breach was located. It was assumed that the craft was constructed of both an inner and outer hull, separated by only a few inches. After many more minutes of effort, the drill broke through into another empty space. Upon extending this opening and looking in, the research team were surprised to discover the interior to be well illuminated with sunlight. It was discovered that the original opening was forced at the lower corner of a sort of large rectangular window porthole which had been cracked. These portholes were not visible from the outside, but were extended all the way around the compartment in huge curved rectangles and separated by only a thin structural brace between them. The exception was the cracked one by which the team gained entry. It had turned a milky, translucent color like frosted glass. Later testing showed that the entire outer hull was covered in this transparent material that was then blocked off by an opaque inner hull where desire was desired by the ships were designed by the ship's designers. This was a thin and inflexible, barely thicker than 4 sheets of typing sheet, I think that inflexible skin, barely thicker than 4 sheets of typing paper, and yet direct blows from sledgehammers would not dent or rupture the foil-like substance. After experimentation with a thin rod used to probe at what looked to be 4 buttons inside a panel in the lower hull extended down along what seemed like an invisible seam and became a ramp leading up into the craft. When calling out provided no reply, the team obtained flashlights and other equipment and entered the disc craft. The greatest discoveries were made on the lower level, dubbed the cargo hold, but the team of investigators did not immediately find the closed door or hatch to the compartment. Instead, they found themselves in a small circular chamber above the size of an elevator cab. About the size of an elevator cab, sorry. A spiral ramp of a very steep incline led up around the center post to the upper chamber dubbed the flight deck, since this had already been observed, some details of the upper chamber, and they had observed 2 bodies, 2 small creatures, slumped in chairs. It was decided to investigate these first in case they might be alive. Inside the upper cabin room, the team found the bodies of 2 small humanoids about 4 feet in height and strapped into seats, like those in jet cockpit acceleration couches, which faced a row of instrument panels built into a curved countertop circling the cabin just below the portholes they had previously seen from outside. The extraterrestrials were dead. Later study decreed that the normal atmosphere inside the cabin was much thinner and colder than our air when the crack in the window frame happened. The 2 pilots died from a sudden increase in pressure and temperature, which caused hemorrhage-like bruises and gave a brownish hue to their skin that first seemed like burns. The seats holding the bodies were found to adjust in air to fit almost any human form and glide around a track in the floor that followed the instrument panels. Finally, the readable part. The group soon recognized that the instrument panels were active, and some symbols were backlit by a blue-green glow. Some of these were changing as they watched. A At this point, Dr. Oppenheimer consulted with Dr. von Neumann and suggested that the team proceed with extreme caution since the craft was obviously still under some form of power. It might be activated into operation either by their interference or by electrical interference from within or without by radio control. Dr. Tuve suggested that the team should explore the construction of the contrails rather than attempt to operate on the chance of being able to trace the power to its source and deactivate it. Sorry, hold on. Rather than attempt to operate the craft on the chance of being able to trace the power to its source and deactivate same until some understanding of the purpose of each instrument could be determined. This was agreed upon and the work began. Among the first discoveries was that each panel of the instruments of the flight deck countertop slide out like a drawer along nearly invisible lines less than 0.2 millimeters wide, and in the track or rail composed of a singular strip of plastic wrapped in a continuous S curve around two metal rails at the front and rear. There were no ball bearings, springs, or motors, and yet each drawer slid both open and shut at the slightest touch of a fingertip, as if self-powered. Later, it was found that the rear roller bar traveled back and forth on a track of its own at the X the drawer was operated. The second track was curved so as to balance the force imparted by the bond in the plastic strip and thus created an almost frictionless mechanism. The type of plastic was then unknown to earthly science, but has since developed and has what is known as molecular memory of its ideal unstressed state, to which it will naturally return. That's interesting. Later it was determined that each section of controls or instruments aboard this craft was self-contained as to its power needs, by some means integrated into its nuclear structure that gathered electromagnetic and other energy from the space around it. In this case, the fields of Earth. There was no central power system anywhere on the ship, and the control and the control, flight, and environmental. Sorry, this is like whenever I think it's gonna stop, it keeps going. Flight and environmental systems draw their power from unknown sources. Instrumentation was eventually found to interconnect and communicate with each other on the molecular level by means of waves or vibrations set up in the atomic structures of each device. No wires or other recognizable electrical components were found. And I guess I can give you a little Uh, no, I'm actually not going to. I could give you a little demonstration. It's called the cavern structure effect. You notice how when they say earlier it said it's porous? Look up the cavern structure effect. The section of the saucer hull which contained both upper and lower deck cabins were joined along microscopic lines by means of electromagnetic locking action engineered into their molecular structure. When Dr. Bush and a team of military engineers found several interlocking hay-like devices and a cabinet built into the wall, Dr. Holland determined that those could be used to dismantle the craft into sections at the joints. The operator of the keys, which linked together for different sized tasks, simply passed the tool over the seam of the device, which looked like a tuning fork, and had each time magnetized with opposite polarity, unlocking the joint when passed over it in one direction, and rejoined the sections when it was drawn in the other direction. Even after disassembly and prolonged storage, I can't freaking read right now. Prolonged storage, the separate sections of this craft still maintain their power and operating capabilities to this day. All attempts to alter the magnetic fields that connect the sections to the craft, performed with the use of powerful electromagnets under the exacting laboratory conditions, have failed to change the degree of interlocking effect. Also, kinetic force, repeated blows, has failed to alter the molecular magnetic alignment according to crystal holographic imaging tests recently conducted. These military guys really love to just write on. Anyway, this is where it's going to get a little spotty, kinda literally. The entire inner hull structure, was built over a lightweight framework of flexible beams supporting the two cabins and formed into PLE 3 let's see what that means. Please shaped. That's not what I'm looking for, but okay. Please shaped equal thirds around a single central shaft or pole running through the thickness of the craft and connecting the upper and lower outer hulls, which also divided into equal thirds. The pole running through the saucer was about 41 feet long and about 16 inches in diameter, was a perfect cylinder of a solid carbon zinc alloy. When maintained or stored in a vertical position, this pole has no special power, but when laid down at the Heart Canyon site on its side, the pole began to drain electrical current from the machines, generators, and batteries, and to broadcast a powerful blank which damaged sensitive instruments and magnetized tools. That's insane. For blank, it had to been it had to be transported upright. Or for this reason, it had to be transported upright. Many other discoveries were made. 3 different styles of writings. First, a form of symbolic picturesque pictures. Second, an alphabetic style of pictograph, which seemed to break down the complex drawings into words. And third, a form that blank, like braille, like the raised symbol. That was raised like symbols in the braille lettering for the blind. But blank much later. Calamos and Friedheim showed this last form to be a part of a mathematical code based on binary counting and read from right to left like Hebrew, but most important discoveries were made on the lower level cabin, labeled the cargo hold. While attempting to take apart something in the lower level entry chamber, the team discovered a hatchway that disappeared so well when closed that they didn't discover it earlier when they first was opened by touching a pictograph on the wall beside it. This was curved to match the walls of the disc, first called the central chamber and later the blank, because it had no frame around it. The mechanism had no motor and worked similarly to the wheelless magnetic levitation railroads we are currently planning to construct, a technology adapted by study of this door mechanism. That's insane. The cylinder that formed a center core at the heart or center of the lower cabin until the 2 openings in the cylinders lined up. The material was so thin that the opening in the inner wall was nearly went unseen. Inside the cargo hold were found a number of what appeared to be scientific work tables and medical examination tables. Just as Dr. Bronk was about to suggest the cargo had cargo routinely carried might be biological or non-human, Dr. Van Valkenburg found a number 14 of small small tube-like chambers in the wall beside a clamshell couch that looked like it would close to sustain a human body. This couch was fitted with hoses for filling it with some liquid or gas when the 2 sections would come together and seal. A closer look at the sealed tubes, which looked like the doors of clothes dryers at a laundromat, revealed that they were complex form of refrigeration systems. 2 were empty and 12 contained the bodies of what looked like human adults and small children as well as infants, all frozen as if preserved for specimens. The decision was made to remove these from what now had been nicknamed the cargo hold and pack them and transport them for preservation until a later autopsy examination. If they were humans, if they were aliens or abducted Earth humans. Sorry, this is the long read, guys. In the process of transferring the frozen EBE bodies from their capsules in the cargo hold of the disk craft to containers of dry ice for shipment, Dr. Bronk, von Rosler, Schurer, and two Army pathologists from the IPU were amazed to discover that one small humanoid adult, similar to the pilots found deceased on the flight deck, had thawed out with a pulse and limited respiration and had lived in an unconscious state for several minutes before expiring. The shocked scientist then realized the capsules were actually cryogenic suspension chambers and that the EBEs were still technically alive inside of them. Although this concept was almost unheard of in the Western medicine at this point, Dr. Bronk dimly recalled reading about secret experiments conducted in Rasal concentration camps during the war. Such experiments had centered inhumanely on suspending the vital life signs and their reanimation by freezing and thawing of the bodies of inmates who were used against their will like at laboratory animals. By this time, the scientists had determined that each section of the ship was able to maintain operating power even after disassembly. A test showed this to be true for the cryogenic capsules as well. Due to the lack of proper facilities at the landing site, the lack of secured holding area for any living EBEs or convalescent provisions, it was decided to remove the entire cryogenic section of the craft and relocate it to a better research and medical laboratory on a military compound of some sort before attempting to restore any of the EBE's consciousness. The story was quickly circulated that yes, bodies had been found, all deceased, that these bodies were removed for later analysis. The bodies of the two small pilots were shown to some other members of the recovery team who had heard about them, and then sealed in dry ice chambers, as was the corpse of the EBE who expired in the cargo hold after thawing. A big display of this was carried out in full view of the other team members, and other dry ice transportation capsules were secretly loaded with dirt and stones before the entire group was loaded into a refrigerator truck labeled high explosives for transport. The rest of the craft in pieces was loaded into flatbed trucks covered with tarps and labeled explosives. Dr. Oppenheimer arranged for full use and needed remodeling of the restricted Navy Auxiliary Airfield complex at Los Alamos Base. The convoy proceeded at night and by the most unobserved route possible to these facilities, while the units of the Magicops team, assisted by the Army Airborne Rangers, stayed at Hart Canyon site to effect the final cleanup operations. The discraft arrived and was put into secure storage for analysis on the 5th of April 1948. The two separate laboratories were set up at the Los Alamos site, one for the detailed photographing and cataloging of each component, of the discraft, and the effort to decipher the forms of writing found on board, and the second facility was organized around the efforts of teams of doctors led by Dr. Detlef Bronk, in an attempt the revival of the craft's occupants. Neither group knew that what the purpose was or the progress of the others' research. Only I can't even speak right now. Dr. Oppenheimer was in this position, acting as a go-between to see all phases of the work in progress and to disseminate the findings of each to the appropriate investigators within each group. This was done in order to limit the risk of information reaching the public and causing a public situation based upon a fear of undetectable aliens amongst them. The thought of riots and murders was on everyone's mind. Sure, man. Eventually, a medical team was able to resuscitate one adult Earth-like humanoid male and 3 Earth-like humanoid infants, all about 6 months of age, 2 male, 1 female. The rest of the infants, and 1 more short, gray-skinned, large-headed humanoid EBE perished in the attempt to revive them. This was largely the result of Dr. S. Bronk and Bush having decided to experiment first on the infants, who were of little intelligence value, and in hope of reviving the short EBE and the adult humanoid for detailed debriefings. The adult Earth-like humanoid male turned out to be himself an EBE, but spoke perfect English with a slight untraceable accent, and exhibited many telepathic and psychic skills as well. This EBE was, in his general appearance, completely human internally. Internally, there were only slight differences in the formation of heart valves, the pancreas, lungs, and he possessed 2 livers and an unfamiliar organ where the gallbladder would be on an Earthman. Also, his digestive and gastrointestinal systems were simpler and less able to process the wide range of foods that Earthmen are used to. He was surprised to discover the scientist had unfrozen him alive, but was otherwise undisturbed, to find himself in the company of Earthmen. He stated within minutes of regaining consciousness that his only surprise would have been if the investigators had not chosen to hold me captive out of your honest curiosity. After a hasty teleconference with President Truman, it was explained to the visitor that if his intentions proved to be non-hostile and he cooperated in the information exchange, he would be granted the diplomatic status and soon be given back to his own kind when the arrangement could be made. To this he had readily agreed, and provided he was not asked to give away any scientific secrets that could alter the course of our natural cultural development. Altogether, the Aztec EBE lived under our protective custody on the Los Alamos complex for nearly a full year, from late April 1948 until March of 1949. After that, he was he was moved to a private safe house set up by Army intelligence in rural Vermont, during which the time he had met with the president and other top government and military administrators prior to him being returned to his people in August of 1949. He gave the scientists and the military debriefers a great deal of mostly non-technical information about his civilization and its motives for being on our Earth. A total of 683 pages of transcripts were made of recorded conversations, and condensed versions of some noteworthy points from these many debriefing sessions follows at the end of this section. The EBE saw little harm in allowing us to keep the remains of his spacecraft for study, since he felt our understanding of it would only gradually develop. He did suggest that his people would probably have to drop one in similar condition in the lapse of the Soviet Union, just for the balance of things to be contained. And you're welcome to take this up with any higher authority you can find willing to listen to you, if you do not approve of this course. The team of scientists were told that the human-like infants were destined for our world anyway, and were welcome to keep them. On the 21st of August 1949, the Aztec EBE was returned to his own kind at a meeting site southwest of Kirkland Air Force Base, Texas. I think that's Kirkland. And arrangements were made for some meeting at the same location to open diplomatic relations. Oh, a future meeting is what it is. So this is what the build-up has been for. This is the this is what the build-up has been for, guys, right? The following conversations were held over an 11-month interval between various investigators labeled here as INT and the Aztec EBE. These are reduced from many hours of recorded debriefing and are included here to give the reader a degree of insight into the character and the personality of the subject. These statements are not intended to provide complete answers to questions. All transcripts of the debriefing and original tape recordings of the same are available through special request. The OIA Office of Counterintelligence, or Magicops HQ, code Digger Command, or Project Aquarius. These may be procured through the XCOM ConNet office at the Pentagon's Joint Strategic Objectives Staff Division. Alright, here we go. Interviewer. What shall we call you? What is your name in your native language? Oh, now, that isn't easy for me, because you will not get the phonetic pronunciations correct without practice, and I am not able to write it down for you because we do not use an alphabetic printed language that I could translate to English. Oh my freaking god. Easily. English easily. Why don't you try it out on us anyway? Of course, Sethimus, or Setimus, SeckTheMouse, will do. That is the first of 4 names I am known by in our written language. This would be known by a single graphic symbol that would explain my entire lineage. Why is your written language so different from ours? Why is yours so different from the Egyptians of 30 centuries ago? Forgive me, but that is not a simple problem. The group I belong to gave up any identification with one planet or its culture before your people learned to make fire. These were once thousands of languages, or there were once thousands of languages, both oral and written, in our many civilizations. It became important to use symbols to represent whole words and even concepts that all of us held in common. Soon, your culture will do the same with public signboards at first. Travel and intercommunications of many peoples will always cause this to happen. Why are you here? Specifically to bring you these children. And we like trees. I agree. I like trees too. Would you mind expanding on that? Certainly. In what direction? You see, we would hate to see you blow up such a pretty little planet, to ruin so many nice trees. If you only knew how hard it is to make a tree from scratch. People are easy, they follow naturally, but not without trees, of course. Green things must be respected above all else, except children, and they are very much alike. What are the intentions of your government by sending you here? Who sent you here and why? If this isn't the first time, evidenced by your familiarity with English, why haven't there been official contacts made? In reverse order. What, and be strung up from one of those beautiful trees? Why? Because you sent us an invitation we could not resist. For our own curiosity, as well as safety, we sent ourselves, or I volunteered. Take your pick. And we have no government. We outlawed it. Or, rather, we outgrew it. I suppose you cannot outlaw a thing without laws. And those require governments, do they not? I don't understand. I know that. Try laughing. You'll still not understand, but you will feel better about your ignorance. Oof, the EBE is cooking this guy. But that's not good enough. Make me understand. It will have to suffice. One cannot teach until a student wants to learn. How good do you want us to be? I will not harm you. We will not harm you or interfere with you any more than you want us to. We are only here to offer what you ask for in a manner we know you will accept. And you did ask us to come and visit. When? Who sent you or who invited you? Almost 50 of you years ago, you sent us signals. You were looking for us, and you scared us with the signal. You should not have been capable of sending. So we answered, but you did not understand our answer then, just as you don't now. We do our best to please others. When you didn't respond to our message to you, and you didn't come for a visit, we felt that we really ought to stop by and see how you were doing. And it has been a long time, and it was the neighborly thing to do, of course. Besides, it was right on the way to another destination, your world, I mean. So you've been here before? I know, we were surprised that you had forgotten us. I don't see how we could forget you. Are you serious? Very seldom. But yes, your culture, which now dominates the civilization, did forget us. Actually, your people seem to have undergone a period of history in which you were so afraid of old truths that you erased them in favor of religious fantasy. Some of your people remembered us orally in their legends, such as those who speak the Kuhalt, Narguant, Nar, Nargin, Narginget, or Ath Athapascan dialects. They lived where we last visited, but the high point of their cultures have long passed. I've never heard of them. Not surprising. Your history shows that the conqueror seldom preserves any history of their victims. I speak of the natives in this landmass, those you call Indians, mostly on your eastern and southern borders and in the ribbon of the land that connects yours to the southern continent. Navajos, Aztecs, Incas, the Olmecs, Toltec cultures. These were all greater than your own civilization at a time when you were burning witches and killing cats, which brought a plague that killed millions of your ancestors. Of course, you drove them mad and destroyed them with venereal diseases and smallpox, those you didn't slaughter for their gold. We need to keep that in mind, guys. Gold. What did the Nazis do? They killed the Jewish people for their gold. And even more crazier, for their skin, for their tattoos, so that they could put it on like lamps, use them for lampshades. Oh, that's what the interviewer says, just oh. And your social pundits speculate and joke about why we don't land in front of your nation's Capitol building and shake hands. We are different, not insane. But we have changed. Western civilization is now the leader in this world for freedom and humanity. Well, EBE is gonna fucking set you straight. Two things. First, we believe that or we wouldn't be here now. Also, tell that to the millions of Hebrews your Western civilization has destroyed in the past decade, or the millions of Negro families whose sons died to stop the madman Hitler, but who do not have plumbing in their homes as we speak. Yes, you make progress that is hopeful for you, but emotionally you are very different from us. Not primitive. That label would be pure egotism on our parts. But you are very different and frightening to us. We are trying to learn to overcome those differences before your runaway technology thrusts you upon us without choice. This is what we need to pay attention to, guys. We have no space travel capability. How could we harm you? In our terms, you're very close to that point. Do you have small children? Yes. Well, they will grow up in a world where space travel is taken for granted, and before they make you a grandfather, Earthmen will be in space. This was 48-49. Whenever this interviewer's kids make him a grandfather, the 60s is when we're in space. So, EBE was right. Alright, so you have been visiting us for some time. I have no choice but to accept that. Even though I'd love some proof. But you still didn't tell me who sent you the message from Earth that brought you back here. Funny enough that you should connect those two subjects. If you dig in a place that I will show you on any world map, you will find your proof. Unfortunately, I am now in the wrong country for this. But others of my people will instruct the proper government to dig there if you do not mind. If you see, in a remote part of the nation you call Yugoslavia, we visited and helped the people there build a very advanced culture over 7,000 years ago. It will be found. But there is a beautiful mystery in the fact that the person who sent us your first message 49 years ago, 1899, did come from this nation originally. The transmission was sent from near here, however, in the state you call Colorado. Can you tell us his name? Are there any proofs of your earlier visits? Thousands of proofs. If you look around, the scientist I spoke of was an electrical researcher named Nikolai Tesla. You're old enough to have heard of him when he was still alive. You know, I just thought of a very good puzzle for someone of you to solve. On an island you named the Isle of Pines in your Pacific Ocean, you will find what is left of a concrete landing platform we built there 115 of your centuries ago. You cannot miss this, since the footings we put down still cover many acres. Look for those if you would like to. No culture on your planet would have built them at that time. It would be fun for me if you ever locate them, because my great-grandfather helped to pour the mortar for them. What? How long do your people live? Somewhat too long, I think, at times. We have built up our age somewhat. It would vary. But I was alive when your whole continent was practically a question mark on the sea charts. So he's basically saying at this time he was around 500 years old. About these babies we found with you, are they human? What are we supposed to do with them? Raise them, of course, as I would have done. Certainly they are human. Perhaps more so, depending on whose definition we use. You are too far away from understanding the whole science of bioengineering yet for all of this to be sensible, but just accept that we have sown the seeds of a rich harvest for your culture, and this will continue. They are only children, not monsters, but raise them well, please, because the care of children is one of the few things we do not laugh about. I remember this man Tesla you spoke of. He died during the war, 1943. But I never heard of that he tried to contact other worlds. It was all in the papers, along with the story of how he was always being taken to court by his neighbors for creating lightning, which struck their properties. Besides, when Tesla didn't answer, we sent a reply to your great inventor. I think that's an M, but I have never been able to really figure out this name right here. Cardinal Marcus. I can't tell. That we had arrived for a visit. Really? When was this? I'm not sure. He never reported it. You see how you hear but you never really listen? Again, it made it all in the papers. We just arrived here in 1920 or 22, and we sent him the letter V in his own code. It meant that he had visitors. He told everyone that he knew for certain that it came from outer space, but nobody really listened. Well, after that, we began to figure out that your man Tesla was way ahead of the rest of your science. Even by accident, he shouldn't have learned how to do what he did in his lifetime. Why did it take 20 years for you to answer Tesla's message? It did not. We answered it immediately. Oh, I see. Our arrival took 22 years, not 20, because that is how long it takes to get here from where we were when we got Tesla's invitation. So long. You took such a far journey just to find us, and didn't even contact us? as I said, this is the funny part, it was on the way to somewhere else when we were planning to visit anyway. Besides, how long or far is all relative, is it not, when we live as long as we do? And do not see even now that we always live in space. We outgrew our origin worlds many generations ago. In fact, you have to try to understand that you are really living in space too. And the only difference is that we left our natural planet and built a new home to go wherever we wanted. And you did the same thing when you left your caves and built houses, uh, built huts, for the same reason. So it's all relative. But why not contact us after such a journey? Laughing, I am sorry. Ha 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 ha. I am sorry, but you still do not see. We did contact you. We are contacting you. All to the limits of your ability to hear our message. And I keep telling you that it is relative. Please laugh about it. I am trying to explain a limit to your perception, which is caused by a limited perception. Do you not see the wonderful paradox? Ugh. Stuffy ass room, man. I'm sorry if my voice is all fucked. Anyway, if you say so, but such a trip has no purpose in our way of seeing things. Of course not. That is why we do what we do. Listen now, because this could go on forever. If yes, do not. We are at home wherever we park our craft. It is our... Oh, it is... something underlined. I can't really tell what that says. By any standards you could apply. We are concerned because oh my god, man. We are concerned because this area of space is one we crest regularly as a simple matter of course. Like your campers who vacation at the same place every year, suddenly we find our camping site threatened by bears. But bears are protected. You're not supposed to hurt them. So you must tame them or give up the whole vacation. Do you see that although you are very long way you are a long way from travel to other stars, by our standards, you will be overrunning the whole area by the next time our children pass by here. Do you see why it is vital, unless you destroy yourselves first, for us to tame you now before you come to us? Would you let a savage headhunter roam the streets of a city without sending them to school first? To school. We cannot interfere with you any more than you would interfere with bears in your parks. Some day, we would rather you joined us, visited our worlds where we do make camp, and joined us on our long voyage of discovery. Or not. It's your destiny as long as you do not try to alter ours. Try to grow into our perspective, and all the illogic you question will seem very reasonable. It is all the matter of scale, centuries instead of decades. Some day you will be just about like us, and you will see. Some new, short-lived species will think that you are some crazy metaphysical paradox too. And you will have to learn to treat them gently as children, without letting your egos get in the way. But with your science, you can make any world your own personal paradise. Why live in spaceships? Yes, and with our weapons we could take what we want as well. But why have one world when you can see them all? And you all covet land, a very old idea, and only natural when the supply is limited. Just try to accept that we are in paradise when we are seeing and understanding something new. Our God is change, and religion is understanding. That's my favorite part right there. Searching for truth is our greatest social challenge and purpose. When you build up your age, this will become as clear to you as why you must breathe air. It sounds like yours is the ideal, perfect world. No. When you have more years, filling them profitably is a real problem. And the trouble with being a loving species is that you want to prove it by making more of your kind with a partner you love. Of course, this must be closely regulated in a culture such as ours, and so relationships of an intimate nature are difficult to leave to one's heart. You speak of the heart being the seat of emotions. This is a concept we use on Earth, but we know it to be a sort of romantic fiction. Why does an advanced race like yours maintain such a notion? Well, I use that particular expression for your benefit, but why do you object to romance? Your species is driven by little else except romantic vision. That's why. Why not ours as well? Certainly our way of life must seem romantic to you. It does to us. We write poems and express ourselves with works of art, just as you do. Many of the greatest works of construction on your world were inspired by a joyful effort of our people and yours, in your distant past. We leave those wherever we go, and you romantic creatures have tried for many generations to explain why such huge monuments to human engineering were ever built in the first place. Why were they built to express why? They were built to express the joy of living. In general, just the joy of living. Of course, and the great sense of satisfaction our people have gotten from working side by side with yours has been one of our biggest joys in life. That is another reason for our being here. Surely even a small child can understand such joy. You keep talking about a message for us. Can you define that a little more? We simply are. We have no deeper purpose than to be. We do not wish direct contact with your people. You would reject us in your present frame of mind. So we seek to be accepted at the lowest level possible, and hence the broadest one possible. That is, as a cultural myth, we seek to be next to Santa Claus, to put it bluntly. This must come to your people from your people. The understanding will be given. Oh my god, this is insane. The understanding will be given to you by the wizened perspective skills of these children we are bringing to you. For your sakes, we must not come from political or religious leaders. For your sakes, this must not come for political or religious leaders. Oh my god, it's amazing. It must flow evenly throughout the common cultures of Earth. The message is not that we are here, but that each one of you can control where you are going, like us, or different, as you choose. But you choose, not your political leaders who believe that only a tiny percent of the elite can rule wisely over their masses, or that those who spread fear of death in order to enrich their lives through religion. Knowledge is only good when spread like seeds from which wisdom might grow, and faith has purpose only when it is not crested of fear. With faith in the wisdom of truth and in each other, your world will come to ours soon enough. Our hope is to be able to receive you as friends and equals when you arrive. That is our message. You must do the work for yourselves. If you do, you will reap the rewards, or keep the rewards. That's where I'm going to end it, because this is a very long document, and I messed up a lot, and I'm just going to keep it all in and just upload it. I love you guys, and just remember, you're living in space.